Welcome to The Explainer. It's not every day that a single two-letter word can be worth billions of dollars. But that's exactly what happened in a landmark Supreme Court case that decided the fate of massive infrastructure projects all across India. All right, so here's how we're going to break this all down. First up, we'll look at the two big laws that are clashing here. Then we get to the star of the show, the billion-dollar word or. We'll see how the court was totally split on this, what the final verdict was, and then we'll dig into the why behind their decision. And finally, the most important part, why this actually matters. So to really get what's going on, we need to do a little time traveling. See, this whole legal showdown is really a story about two very, very different laws. Laws that say how the government can take private land for public use. And for the longest time, we're talking over 100 years, the rulebook was basically a relic from the colonial era. On one side, you've got this old law from 1894. Think of it as the government's bulldozer. It was all about state power, speed, getting things done. But then you fast forward to 2013, and a whole new law shows up. And this one, it's a total game changer. It's designed to be much, much fairer to landowners. We're talking way more money, actual studies on how projects affect people, and a complete shift in focus from the state's raw power to the citizens' actual rights. Just a massive philosophical change. Okay, so now we get to the real juicy part, the absolute heart of the problem. What happens when you've got these two laws crashing into each other, right? Imagine land deals that got started under the old government-friendly rules, but then, boom, the new, more landowner-friendly law kicks in before they're finished. This overlap, this transition period, it created a legal black hole. So this was the big, big question. Could landowners who are stuck in these old, ongoing cases get the better deal from the new law? The answer was supposed to be right there in a specific clause of the 2013 Act, Section 24, subsection 2. But, well, the way it was written was, let's just say, a bit of a mess. And there it is, the whole thing. This entire, massive legal battle with billions of dollars on the line all came down to how you read that one tiny two-letter word, or. It looks so simple, right? But depending on your interpretation, it created two completely different realities for both landowners and the government. So the landowner's argument was pretty straightforward. Or means or. If the government failed to do either of those things, take the land or pay us, then the old deal is dead and we should get the much better compensation from the new 2013 law. Simple. But the government came back and said, whoa, not so fast. That or should really be read as and. They argued the deal only dies if they failed to do both. This wasn't just grammar. Their interpretation would save countless public projects from going bankrupt. Now, this wasn't just some nerdy legal debate. This disagreement sent shockwaves through the entire system, and it actually split the Supreme Court right down the middle. This led to years of complete and utter chaos, with different benches making opposite rulings. And get this, in 2014, one bench at the Supreme Court sided with the landowners. Huge win for them. But then, just 4 years later, in 2018, another bench looked at the exact same question and came to the complete opposite conclusion. You had the highest court in the country literally contradicting itself. It was a mess. So the only way forward was to form an even bigger bench, 5 judges this time, to finally put this debate to rest. So after all those years of legal fights and conflicting decisions, this was it, the moment of truth. How was this 5-judge Constitution bench finally going to read that one single billion-dollar word? And the verdict was crystal clear. It was a massive win for the state. The court declared that for an old land deal to be considered lapsed, both conditions had to be true. The government must have failed to take physical possession and failed to pay compensation. Reading or as and was now the law of the land. But this wasn't just about picking a word out of a hat. The court's decision was really based on a very practical view of what would happen in the real world. So let's take a look at the logic that got them to this huge decision. The judges were really focused on the real-world impact. They didn't want to dig up old cases that had been settled for years, what they called dead and still claims. They were also trying to avoid the disastrous consequences of killing the legal basis for projects that were already built and running. I mean, think about the metro line you ride or highways that crisscross the country. And, pretty importantly, they didn't want to reward people who might have deliberately dragged out their own cases just to try and get a bigger payout under the new law. The court also leaned on this really old, really important legal idea, summed up by a Latin phrase, lex non cogit ad impossibilia. All it really means is that the law can't ask you to do the impossible. So, for example, if a landowner themselves went and got a court order that physically stopped the government from taking possession of the land, well, the government can't then be punished for that delay, right? The clock would stop ticking. And here it is, in the court's own powerful words. They basically said the 2013 law was not a time machine. It was never meant to be a tool to go digging up old legal graves and give people a second bite at the apple on claims that were already done and dusted. The past, for the most part, had to stay in the past. Okay, so the Supreme Court has made its decision. A massive legal question is finally answered. But what does this all actually mean, for the country, for development, and for regular people? Well, the impact really cuts both ways. On one side, it's a huge sigh of relief for infrastructure projects. It gives them legal stability and saves the government from a financial nightmare. But on the other side, it's a really tough blow for a lot of landowners who felt they got a raw deal under the old system. And from a legal standpoint, it's a powerful statement that courts can look past the literal words on a page to make sure a law's true purpose is met and to avoid, well, total chaos. So, in the end, this huge judgment brings a lot of legal certainty, but it also leaves us staring at a really big, timeless question. When we're pushing for national development, how do we find the right balance between what's good for the public and what's fair to the individual? This ruling answered that question in one way, but you can be sure that the debate itself is far from over.